and welcome to ALPS. My name is Paul Abram. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. I've had over 20 years in the mental health field, and one of my areas of expertise is in managing stress. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Given everything that's occurred and transpired over the past month or so, and especially even the past few days the levels of stress that we're feeling, because is off the charts, because this is something that is, especially with the COVID-19 scare, crisis that we've never faced before, and it's something we're not familiar with. And so today we're going to talk about how the stress that we're feeling from that, how that can actually affect our immune system, and the impact that it has on our bodies, and we're going to talk about some ways that we can help manage some of that stress and keep our immune system working as best as it can. Now, to kind of give you a little bit of background of how I like to teach, I'm one of those types of individuals that if I'm on my way to work and I'm using a navigation app such as Waze or Google Maps, and all of a sudden one day it takes me a different route, I'm one of those types of people where it's great. I'm glad that it's telling me how to go and where to go, but I don't want to just know that. I also want to know why. Why should I be going this way? Why should I be taking this particular route? Did traffic patterns change? Is there a better way that I just never knew about? Is there road construction? Was there an accident? I want to know why. So that way I can plan out the rest of my daily drives. Is this something I should be taking every day or not? And that's the way I look at stress. The way I look at stress is that it's not just about understanding um, how you should manage it, but the more you understand about what exactly stress is and understand why we feel stress, the more I think that those strategies can be more effective. Once you have a good understanding of why it is you feel what you feel and why you should use some of these tips and tricks and strategies and solutions, I think you'll be much more successful in managing your own stress level. Now, some of the things we're going to talk about today, we're going to define exactly what is stress, what is it that you're feeling, what is anxiety, what is feeling overwhelmed, whatever you want to name it. What exactly is the stress that you are feeling? What is it? We're going to define it. We're going to talk about its physical impact on our bodies and our immune system and our ability to fight off infection. And then we're going to talk about how your perceptions, beliefs, your values, how that all works into the amount of stress that you feel. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about understanding what it is that we're feeling. So many times in therapy, I'll hear so many of my clients say, "Well, I'll ask them, what were you feeling? What was going through your mind at that time? What was the emotions that you had?" And I'll get the deer in headlights kind of stare of, I don't know, I can't put it into words. I don't know exactly what I was feeling. We'll talk about having a better understanding and why we kind of get that feeling that we don't know exactly what we are feeling, and then lastly, we'll talk about the different strategies. Once we have a good understanding of what exactly stress is, we'll tackle some of the strategies to combat and manage our stress levels. Now, when it comes to stress, stress is not a bad thing. I know that sounds so counterintuitive. It's so many times we hear, "Oh Lord, this is stress is something that we need to get rid of completely." No, stress is what keeps us safe. It keeps us safe from danger. There's an actual biological reason why we do have it. It's our body's physical reaction to what we perceive as dangerous or unfamiliar. Our our minds, when it comes down to it, our minds are nothing more than big balls of electrical fat that want to try and predict the future. And when we don't know what's going to happen, like what's going on with COVID-19 right now, when we don't know what's going to happen a month from now, 2 months from now, 1 week, 1 day from now, when we don't know and we're not able to predict it, that's when we start getting overwhelmed, we start getting stressed, we start getting panicked, and we start reacting. And anytime you're in a dangerous or unfamiliar situation, think about what happens to you physically. your heart begins to race, your skin gets a little sweaty, um, you you begin to breathe a little bit faster, your muscles get a little twitchier, and you start to get the butterflies in your stomach. And if you think about what time in our life are you sweating, breathing heavy, heart's racing, your muscles kind of all twitchy, it's when you just get done running. And so what stress is whenever we're not able to predict what's going to happen, what's about to happen, our bodies just begin to think, well, this is dangerous. We need to be able to warm up and get ourselves out of danger's way. We need to be able to run as soon as possible. And if we can't run, then we need to be able to stand our ground and fight. And so this is our fight or flight response. And our brains are literally physically connected to our bodies. And the thing is, if we had no stress, that would be just as bad as having too much stress. When I was younger, I grew up across the street from Midway Airport. I grew up there I grew up there in the 80s and left around in the 90s. And what I remember is that it was right around that time when everybody was getting car alarms, and we could always tell when somebody was brand new to the neighborhood, because every time a plane would fly over, that car alarm would go off, and planes would fly over all of the time. So you can imagine how often these car alarms were going off. And so anybody who had lived in the neighborhood for a while, they always had the person installing it, the mechanic installing it, let him know that, hey, could you set the sensitivity a little bit lower because I live across the street from the airport. And so, but that would keep it from going off all the time. But you didn't want it set too low, because if somebody was genuinely trying to break into your car, you wanted it to be able to go off. You didn't want somebody breaking out the windows and then nothing. You wouldn't hear anything. So the same thing is with stress. Our stress kicks in, and it works fast because it's supposed to. It keeps us out of danger. And it could be either a positive or a negative reaction to it. And so many times we tend to think of that stress as just something that's in our head, and it's not. It's that's where it starts, but it ultimately ends up in having a biological, physical reaction in it. If you look at the picture that's up on the screen right now, you'll see that there's a couple areas of our brain. Right here in the back part of our brain, that's our brainstem. That's our reptilian brain. That's where our daily life functions occur. Our walking, our sleeping, our eating, things like that. That's where it handles most of our daily life functions. Then if you look in that big kind of yellow loop right in the middle, that right inside there is what's called our limbic system, our emotional midbrain. And then finally outside of that is where all the pink areas. That's the cortex. That's where our logical or higher order thinking is. That's where our logical brain is. And the thing is that emotional midbrain works faster than our logical brain, because it's supposed to. Because if you think about it, if you're out in the middle of the desert and you hear a rattle suddenly occur, you don't want to start thinking about that logically. You don't want to sit there and go, now what I understand is that rattlesnakes are indigenous to Arizona. They live in the desert. They're venomous, and ouch, I'm bit. No. What do you want to do when you hear a rattle out in the middle of the desert? You want to be able to get out of there, out of harm's way right away. You want that emotional midbrain to kick in right away. But the problem is that, like what's going on with COVID-19, it's great in short bursts. But what's happening is that we've spent the last couple of days, weeks, where we're under our fight or flight response 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we never shut it off. And if you think about your car, if you were to gun your car engine and you gunned it a couple of times, pressed down on the accelerator, revved it up, no big deal, doesn't do any damage. But if you're constantly revving the car engine, you're gunning it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, eventually what's going to happen to that car engine? It's going to break down. And if you're constantly in the fight or flight mode, eventually your body's going to break down. It's not going to be able to operate properly. It's not going to do what it needs to do. And whenever you're in danger of being exposed to an infection such as COVID-19, Granted, we don't have any natural immunity to that, but any sort of infection that might make us more susceptible, um, the more we're the, the more we're in that fight or flight mode for longer periods of time, the more of effect it's going to have on our immune system. Eventually, it's going to wear it down, and it's going to break down. And so, yeah, and this also affects our sleep too, because if you think about it, whenever you're sitting there at nighttime and you can't fall asleep, you've got all these things kind of running through your head about your loved ones, about yourself, about do I have enough hand sanitizer, toilet paper, things like that, and your mind's just racing. Well, then your body's going to start racing as well. And if you were to take a couple laps around your block at full speed, running around, and then jump into bed, of course you couldn't fall asleep. The same thing's happening when you're stressed out. If you have all these racing thoughts through your head, it's as if you're trying to sleep, but your body is trying to run. So, and the more that you don't sleep, the more stress that you begin to feel. It's kind of almost a cycle. So the more stress you feel, the less sleep you get. The less sleep you get, the more stress you feel. The less stress you, the more stress you feel, the less, and it just becomes this cycle. And eventually, what happens? And I love this quote here. In terms of psychoimmunology, it's a quote from, and I'm really going to butcher this name. It's Andrew Golishek from Psychology Today. Psychoimmunology is the ability to fend off illness and disease. And it depends on several factors, some of which are beyond our control, but the way we react to stress and the general health of our immune system are things that we can influence. And what he's saying there is that our immunology, there's biological factors that we cannot control. That's not in our control, but you know what is in control? The way we react to stress. And that has a direct impact on our biological function of our immune system. And so we're going to talk about some strategies about how we can properly manage that stress today.